networking, security, and Wireshark.
So I realized recently that I've mentioned VPNs quite a lot in my videos when talking about privacy and how there are limitations to VPNs, but in some cases it's good to use a VPN. I realized though I haven't actually explained in very simple terms how VPNs actually protect you when you're surfing online. So I thought I'd take a few minutes to show you a very quick overview of how VPNs work, why they're good, and some of their limitations. So to start and to understand really why we need VPNs, you need to understand a little bit about how traffic gets from your devices to a remote website, let's say Google, okay? So there are two components of the traffic that we have to be concerned about. One is something known as DNS traffic, and the other is the actual data between your machine and Google. And let me explain how that works. So say I'm connecting from my smartphone to Google. On the left here, I've got my home network, and this is my ISP router. The ISP usually gives you, a router that has both physical connections and say Wi-Fi. So let's just say I'm connected over Wi-Fi. The first thing that my device needs to do in order to get to Google is to get an IP address for Google. An IP is just a 4-digit number. Well, not 4-digit, it's a 4-section number. Each of these can be 1 to 256. You've seen them before, things like 8888, right? This is an IP address. Computers, and specifically data networks, need IP addresses to effectively route or direct the traffic to Google. But you don't know IP addresses. You know things like domain names, which are the actual names you recognize. So like say google.com, okay? So DNS's responsibility is to actually turn this name, google.com, into an IP address. And to do that, your device actually has to reach out over your network. So let's change the color. Over your network through your ISP router, to the ISP's network, right? This is your provider's network, down to a DNS server, right? This DNS server could be provided by the ISP or elsewhere, provided by a third party. And then that gets an IP address for Google and sends it back to your device. Step 1 is done. Step 2 is then your device, knowing the IP, sends the data traffic through the ISP router again, through the ISP network again, and then to Google. And then your communication between yourself and Google starts. Well, so there's two pieces, right? There's the getting the name, like basically looking it up in the address book. And the second piece is to actually send your traffic to the website. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that if someone were to get access to the traffic, both between your device and this DNS server, and or your device to this remote web server, Google, they can tell a lot about both where you're going and in some cases what you're doing. And that has a lot of privacy implications, right? If they can know the type of websites you go to, when you go to those websites, that could be a problem for you and for your family in terms of your privacy. So how would they get access to that? Well, there's a number of ways. So if, for example, here you're connected to Wi-Fi, but this isn't your home, right? This could be like a coffee shop. And you're using Wi-Fi that like 10 other people are using. Well, there are attacks where a nefarious actor who's actually sitting in the same network, and you may not even know they're doing it, can sniff and basically suck up all this traffic in wireless and actually read it using tools like Wireshark. Okay? I actually did a video on this that if you're really interested, you can take a look at. But this allows someone locally, right, to be able to do that. If someone were to gain access to your router, like say someone was able to hack your router, they can do the same thing. They can get a copy of the traffic going in and out of this network. Or, for example, if you are connecting to someone else's internet who you don't trust. So say, for example, you are connecting this ISP router, you're in a third or in another country. And say it is the government who owns the internet service that you are using. Well, they have full access to your traffic and can actually pull captures and actually analyze your data to tell where you're going. And again, in some cases, not all, what you're doing on those websites. So that's the problem. is that in this space here between your device and the router, for various reasons, malicious actors can get access to your data. And if they did, they would know a lot about what you're doing. Now, what's more is that I explained in a previous video how ISPs, so the companies that provide you access to the internet, have access to this data as well. Because you are the conduit, or they are the conduit, that you use to get to everywhere, to DNS, to Google, and everywhere else on the internet. So either legally or illegally, and legally could be because the government has asked them to do it, ISPs can have access to this data as well. And the same thing goes, they can tell what you're doing and where you're going. So this is the privacy issue, right? Is that this amount of traffic between you and the destinations you're going to, all this traffic here in between in orange, if someone were to get a copy of it or access to take a copy of it, they can tell a lot about you. So how do VPNs solve this? So let's say you subscribe to a VPN service over here. The VPN service itself is located on the internet. Everything over here on the right is the internet, and everything over here is your own network or the network you're using that day. So the VPN provider has a server or multiple servers across the globe which sit somewhere on the internet. And this is how it works. The traffic from your device, say you have an app for the VPN provider on your phone or on your PC, okay, this is VPN, gets sent, instead of going to either the DNS server or to Google directly, it gets sent through your ISP, through the ISP's network, to the VPN provider first. And what's more is that this connection is all encrypted with very, very heavy encryption, which means that anyone looking at this traffic from the vantage point of, say, again, the attacker in the cafe, or someone getting data from your router, or someone in the ISP's network sniffing your data, etc., all they're going to see is gibberish. They could see that you're connecting to the VPN provider, but they're not going to be able to see what you're doing in that tunnel. And that's where the privacy comes in. So when your traffic gets to this VPN server, from there, the VPN server itself sends that traffic to where it has to go. So either it has to go to DNS servers, for example, or it has to go to a website like Google. So everyone between here and here, the VPN provider itself, if they were to get a copy of your traffic, they can't tell anything. They can't see your DNS. They can't see what websites you're visiting. All they could see is that you're connecting to a VPN provider. That they can see. But the what, they can't see. So this is what VPN provides. It provides a level of privacy with respect to local connections, so like infiltrators in your local network, to more institutionalized potential threats where maybe an ISP's network or whole network gets compromised, or they're feeding data to a third party without your knowledge. All that gets protected. So that's the benefit of a VPN. The next thing I want to cover very briefly is why VPNs are often used when people want to do streaming. Namely, they want to stream content that's only available in certain countries. Well, think about what happens when you connect to a VPN. All of the traffic from your device gets sent through this tunnel to wherever the VPN server is, and only then does it go out to the internet, to various resources. So say this wasn't Google, say this was something like Netflix. So these servers, for any sort of reputable VPN provider, these servers are offered all over the globe in various countries. This is for performance reasons, because you don't necessarily want to connect from North America to, say, Taiwan in order to use VPN services. But it's also for being able to access various resources in other countries as if you were in that country. So because this server is located physically in another country, say this is in, I don't know, let's say this is in England in the UK, okay? It has an IP address of a UK internet user. So say it's just 1111. This is just a fake IP, but just say that's the IP. So when the VPN provider is sending your request to Netflix, the IP that Netflix sees is the IP of the VPN server and not the IP of your device or your home internet. So that's why in some cases you could bypass geolocation restrictions that these services have by using a VPN. And then the service thinks, okay, well, this person isn't in, the US. They are in the UK. Now, a lot of companies these days have gotten smart to that, right? What they'll do is they know of all the big VPN providers and what servers that they offer. And then in the service itself, they have a list of those IP addresses that may be part of a VPN network. And if they detect that the traffic is coming from one of these IPs, they'll just block it. But there are still quite a number of services that don't have this kind of block and still allow you to connect freely from a VPN provider. But that's why the same technology that protects your privacy allows you to do things like streaming and accessing content from other countries without getting blocked. All right, so here's our last topic, which is what do VPNs not protect you from with respect to privacy? Because I will always say VPNs are a good solution to help improve your privacy on the internet. They are not foolproof. And you should always, always, always assume that if someone on the internet, someone who has enough resources and time and energy, wants to get access to your data, they potentially can get access to your data. So security oftentimes is like an onion. It's like you add layers and layers and layers of security to help protect what's inside. But you always know if someone has a big enough knife, they can come through and cut it. So what's the problem with VPNs? Well, like I mentioned, all of this is protected in VPN. The data as it leaves your device, going through your internet access, going through your ISP, going through the internet to your VPN provider. The problem is that once it hits your VPN provider, then your data goes out as it would normally to these resources. And if someone were to sniff that traffic, they could see that, okay, some user using this VPN service, so like user A, is accessing Google and is accessing these malicious websites. Say you're torrenting, for example. So that's not a direct connection to you because this VPN provider, when it connects to a third party, it's connecting from its own IP. So remember we said before, like say 1111. So it's not your IP address here, it's their own IP. But certainly, this VPN provider has ways of detecting who is using this IP and when, and tying it back to a user. And remember, these VPN services are usually paid for, so you usually have to pay for it with credit card or a Bitcoin account or something like that. Okay? So there is some way that this VPN provider will know your identity. And even though the outside world does not necessarily know how to correlate this to you, the VPN provider does. So this means if you're doing something on the internet, which you really, really don't want anyone to see, you're putting an incredible amount of trust into this VPN provider. So a lot of VPN providers advertise that, well, we don't log, we don't track our users, we have strict privacy, we're located in countries that have no data retention policies. All that stuff is great, right? It's great advertisements to their customers to get their customers to trust them. However, I don't know of an organization in the world that if they weren't coerced with enough motivation from, say, like a government, that they wouldn't immediately produce these logs and send them to the authorities. Okay, for better or worse. Like there could be someone who's accessing resources that are harmful, and there's investigation, and the authorities need to know who is accessing all these very dangerous sites, and they need to tie that back to a person. And this company will abide by the law, right? Even though they say they don't. So that's really the trade-off, right? Is that you are changing the point of trust from, your ISP, your home network, your ISP network, the public internet. From there, you're shifting it to your VPN provider. And now the question is, well, how trustworthy is your VPN provider in terms of keeping your privacy safe? In most cases, I think, 99.9% of cases, the ones that advertise all this privacy will adhere to it. But again, this is why I mentioned that with enough energy, time, and resources, someone can do it, especially someone like a government who really needs access to that data. So always keep that in mind. So are VPNs perfect? No. Are they 99.9% better than anything else you have available to you to protect your privacy? Yeah. And for the average user these days, they make it super simple to get VPN software working on either a mobile device or a PC. VPNs are part of a strategy. With privacy, you also always have to think about layers, and VPN is just one of those layers. Other solutions like ad blockers are valuable as part of that defense. Correct education about what is there online, especially if you have a family and you have a whole family of people who are browsing the internet freely. Education about where to browse and where not to browse, what websites to stay away from is really important. How and when to provide your personal information and when to never provide your personal information, right? And what websites should be getting that and what websites shouldn't be. All that stuff goes into a strategy that you could use to protect your privacy. But certainly VPNs are a good tool in the toolkit to help with that initiative. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions on the topic we've covered, please join the Discord server where we talk all things network. Until next time.